The rain that evening in late October was not a gentle shower, it was a deluge that battered the city of Seattle, turning the streets into rivers of oil-slicked asphalt and reflected neon. Inside the back of my chauffeured town car, the silence was absolute, a hermetically sealed bubble of leather and climate control that separated me from the storm outside. I, Elena Vance, sat with a posture that had been drilled into me by decades of boarding schools and boardrooms, my hands resting quietly in my lap. At 65, I had learned that silence was often the loudest thing a woman could wear. My hands, however, were not empty. They clutched a small, wooden box. It was ugly. There was no other word for it. My name is Elena Vance, and if you want to hear more stories from older people, subscribe to the channel Family Secrets, and let me know where you are listening from. It was made of rough-hewn oak, dark with age and stained from years of handling. The hinges were rusted iron, and the latch was stiff. To the casual observer, it looked like something one might find in a garage sale bin for $1, or perhaps floating in the debris of a shipwreck. But to me, it was heavier than the gold bars stored in my vault downtown. It was a test. The final test. Tonight was my son Julian's 30th birthday. 30 years since I had nearly died bringing him into this world. 30 years of protecting him, funding him, excusing him, and loving him with a ferocity that I now feared had been my greatest mistake. Julian was a good boy, or at least he had been, until he met Sophia. Sophia, my daughter-in-law of 2 years, was a creature of such exquisite beauty and such profound emptiness that she fascinated me, much like a poisonous orchid. She was 26, a social media influencer whose career consisted of photographing expensive meals and wearing clothes she couldn't afford. Clothes I usually ended up paying for through Julian's supplementary credit cards. The car slowed as we approached the gated community where they lived. I looked out the window at the house. It was a modern monstrosity of glass and steel, cold and imposing, a house I had purchased for them as a wedding gift because Sophia had claimed the Victorian I offered was too haunted by history. This house had no history. It had no soul. Just like the party waiting inside. My driver, Thomas, a man who had been with me since my husband passed 10 years ago, caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, his voice low. He knew what was in the box. He knew the plan. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the old wood. "I have never been more sure, Thomas. And I have never been more terrified. But a gardener must prune the dead branches if the tree is to survive. Tonight, we see if the tree is rotten to the root." He nodded and pulled up to the curb. I stepped out into the rain, waving away his umbrella. I wanted to feel the cold. I wore a simple grey wool coat, elegant but understated, and no jewelry. Tonight, I was not Elena Vance the philanthropist, the heiress, the silent owner of the city's largest real estate firm. Tonight, I was just a mother. A mother with a humble gift. I rang the doorbell. The sound of thumping bass and shrill laughter vibrated through the frosted glass. It took a long time for someone to answer. Finally, the door swung open. It wasn't Julian. It was one of Sophia's friends, a girl with impossibly high cheekbones and a glass of champagne in her hand. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my wet coat and the battered box in my hands with a mixture of confusion and disdain. "The service entrance is around the back," she slurred, turning away. "No," I said, stepping into the foyer before she could close the door. "I am Julian's mother." The girl blinked, suppressed a giggle, and shouted over the music. "Jules, your mom is here. And she looks wet." The humiliation began instantly, as I knew it would. I walked into the living room. It was crowded with people who looked like they had been manufactured in a factory for beautiful, shallow things. The air smelled of expensive perfume and marijuana. In the center of the room, holding court by a tower of cupcakes, were Julian and Sophia. Julian looked handsome in a tailored suit I had paid for, but his eyes were glassy, his smile too wide, too desperate to please the sharks circling him. Sophia glittered in a sequin dress that cost more than a teacher's annual salary. When she saw me, her smile didn't reach her eyes, it just stretched her skin tighter. "Elena." Sophia cried out, her voice pitching up an octave, a performance for her audience. "We didn't think you'd make it. We thought you were busy with your knitting or whatever it is you do." A ripple of laughter went through the room. I stood my ground, dripping rainwater onto their white marble floor. Julian looked at me, then at the floor, shame coloring his cheeks pink. "Hi, Mom," he mumbled. "Glad you could come." He didn't hug me. He didn't offer to take my coat. He was afraid. Afraid of his wife, afraid of his friends, afraid of being associated with the wet, grey woman standing in his foyer. "Happy birthday, Julian," I said, my voice steady. "I have brought you a gift." I held out the wooden box. The room went quiet. The music seemed to lower in volume as 50 pairs of judgmental eyes locked onto the ugly, battered object in my hands. Sophia stepped forward, her heels clicking on the marble like ice picks. She looked at the box with open disgust, her nose wrinkling as if I had handed her a dead rat. "What is that?" she asked, poking it with a manicured fingernail. "It looks like you dug it out of a dumpster, Elena. Did you forget it was his birthday and just grab some firewood on the way over?" The crowd laughed again, louder this time. I looked at Julian. "It is a family heirloom," I said, ignoring her, speaking only to my son. "It belonged to your great-grandfather. He brought it over from the old country when he had nothing but the shirt on his back. Inside this box is the foundation of everything we are. It is the key to your future, Julian. But you must open it with respect. You must understand its value is not on the surface." I held it out to him. Julian reached for it, his hand trembling slightly. For a second, I saw the boy I used to know, the boy who used to listen to my stories by the fireplace. But then Sophia laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "Oh, please," she scoffed, snatching the box from my hands before Julian could touch it. She held it up to the light, shaking it. It rattled. "Listen to that. It sounds like loose teeth. A family heirloom? Seriously, Elena? Everyone else brought Rolexes, keys to new cars, designer trips. And you bring a box of trash." She turned to the crowd, playing to the gallery. "Can you believe this? Her only son turns 30, a milestone, and the great Elena Vance brings him a rotted piece of wood. It's insulting, really. It shows how much you actually care about him." "Sophia, don't," Julian whispered, but his voice was weak, a paper tiger in a hurricane. "It might be important." "Important." Sophia spun on him, her eyes flashing with a cold, manipulative fire. "Julian, look at it. It's garbage. She's mocking us. She's mocking you. She controls the purse strings, she judges everything we do, and now she humiliates you in front of your friends with this junk? She probably wants you to use it as a coffin for your dreams." She looked back at me, her face twisting into a sneer. "We don't want your trash, Elena. We are moving up in the world. We have class. We have style. And this." She gestured to the box. "This belongs in the gutter." I looked at Julian. I waited. I prayed. "Say something," I screamed in my head. "Defend your mother. Defend your history. Be the man I raised." Julian looked at the box in his wife's hands, then at her angry, beautiful face, and finally at me. He swallowed hard. And then, he looked away. Maybe you should take it back, Mom," he mumbled, looking at his shoes. "Soph is right. It's not really appropriate for a party like this. It's kind of embarrassing." The crack in my heart was audible only to me, but it was massive, a fault line shattering the foundation of my life. My son had chosen. He had chosen the glitter over the gold, the shadow over the substance. "I see," I said. My voice was very quiet, very cold. "You find my gift embarrassing, Julian?" "Look at it," he snapped, his guilt turning into defensive anger. "Yes. It's embarrassing. Why can't you just be normal? Why can't you just write a check like everyone else's parents? Why do you always have to play these games?" Sophia beamed, sensing victory. "Exactly. We don't want it." She walked to the large, sliding glass doors that opened onto the patio. The rain was lashing down harder now, a storm of biblical proportions. She slid the door open, letting the wind howl into the room, blowing cocktail napkins off the tables. "You know what we do with trash in this house?" she yelled over the wind. She reared her arm back and threw the box. I watched in slow motion as the wooden box, the box that contained the legacy of the Vance family, sailed through the wet air. It arced over the patio railing and disappeared into the darkness of the ravine below the house. Gone. Thrown into the mud and the brambles like a used tissue. The crowd cheered. Someone whistled. Sophia slammed the door shut and dusted her hands off, looking at me with triumph. There, she said. Problem solved. Now, Elena, unless you have a real gift hidden in that coat, I think it's time you left. You're dampening the mood. Literally. She pointed to the front door. Julian didn't look at me. He grabbed a glass of champagne and downed it in one gulp, turning his back to his mother. I stood there for a moment, the silence of my own soul deafening amidst the noise of the party. I adjusted my coat. I didn't cry. Tears were for people who still had hope, and I had none left. You are right, Sophia, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a razor. I do not belong here. And clearly, neither did my gift. I turned to my son's back. Happy birthday, Julian. I hope you enjoy the party. Because it is the last one I will ever fund. They didn't hear me, or they chose to ignore it. They were already laughing at something else, the incident with the crazy old mother, already becoming an anecdote to amuse their friends. I walked out of the house, the heavy door clicking shut behind me, sealing my decision. I walked back out into the rain. It soaked my hair, ran down my face, mixing with the cold reality of the night. Thomas was waiting by the car, holding the door open. He looked at my empty hands, then at my face. He saw the devastation there, but he also saw the resolve. Mrs. Vance? He asked softly. Did he take it? No, Thomas, I said, sliding into the leather seat. He threw it away. They threw it into the ravine. Thomas's face hardened. He closed the door and got into the driver's seat. Where to, ma'am? Home. No, I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. Take me to the office. Call Mr. Henderson. Wake him up if you have to. I need my lawyer. As the car pulled away, leaving the glowing, pulsing house behind in the rain, I looked out the window one last time. They were celebrating inside, drinking my champagne, living in my house, wearing my money. They thought they had won. They thought they had humiliated a foolish old woman. They had no idea that when Sophia threw that box into the dark, she hadn't just thrown away a piece of wood. She had thrown away the only lifeline they had. Inside that box, beneath the velvet lining, was not jewelry or cash. It was a key. A rusty, iron key to a safe deposit box in Zurich. And inside that safe deposit box was the deed to the company, the access codes to the family trust, and a single, handwritten check for $50 million, made out to Julian Vance. But more importantly, there was a letter. A letter that granted full control of the estate to the bearer of the key. By throwing the box away, they had effectively abdicated the throne. The car sped up, merging onto the highway. The city lights blurred into streaks of red and white. I dialed the number. Hello? A sleepy voice answered. Harrison, I said. It's Elena. Initiate Protocol Omega. Tonight. There was a pause on the other end, a sharp intake of breath. Omega, Elena? Are you sure? That freezes everything. The credit cards, the mortgage payments, the car leases. It evicts them. It's the nuclear option. I am sure, I said, watching the rain streak the glass. They threw the box away, Harrison. They threw it in the trash. My God, Harrison whispered. Do they know what was in it? No, I said. But they are about to find out what life is like without it. Back at the house, the party raged on for hours. Julian felt a strange mixture of relief and nausea. He was free of his mother's judging eyes, but the look on her face as she left haunted him. Drink up, babe. Sophia shouted, draped over his shoulder, smelling of vodka and vanilla. She's gone. We don't need her bad vibes. We have each other, and we have the future. She kissed him messily. You're 30. You're a man now. You don't need mommy holding your hand. Julian smiled weakly. Yeah, you're right. She's stuck in the past. Exactly. Sophia laughed. And that box? My God, the smell of it. Can you imagine if we kept it? It probably had termites. They danced, they drank, they celebrated their independence. Around 3 a.m., the last guests stumbled out. The house was a wreck of spilled drinks and crushed cake. Sophia kicked off her heels, groaning. What a night. Best party ever. She walked to the kitchen to get water. Julian stayed in the living room. He walked to the sliding glass door and looked out into the rain-soaked darkness of the backyard. The ravine was a black void below. Somewhere down there, in the mud and the filth, lay his mother's gift. A strange curiosity tugged at him. Why had she been so serious? The key to your future, she had said. Julian. Sophia yelled from the kitchen. The water dispenser isn't working. And the lights on the fridge are off. Julian frowned. Power outage? The storm is pretty bad. He tried the light switch on the wall. Nothing. The living room remained dark. Weird, he muttered. He pulled out his phone to use the flashlight, but he noticed a notification on the screen. Then another. Then a dozen. Emails from the bank. Texts from American Express. Notifications from the leasing company for the house. Transaction declined. Account frozen. Notice of default. Lease termination imminent. His heart hammered against his ribs. He opened his banking app. He typed in his passcode with trembling fingers. The little wheel spun, and then the numbers appeared. $0. He checked the savings. $0. He checked the investment portfolio. Access denied. Soph. He called out, his voice cracking. Sophia, come here. Sophia walked in, holding a bottle of Evian she'd found in the pantry. What is it? Why is the power out? The silence in the dark house was absolute, broken only by the sound of the rain. She cut us off, Julian whispered, the horror dawning on him. She actually did it. She can't. Sophia screamed, stamping her bare foot. It's our money. We are entitled to it. She's just being a petty old witch because I threw away her stupid box. She stopped. Her eyes went wide. She looked at the sliding glass door. She looked at the darkness outside. The box, she whispered. Julian. What did she say was in the box? Julian stared at the window. She said it was the foundation of everything. She said it was the key to my future. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the alcohol haze. Sophia ran to the sliding door and ripped it open. The wind howled in, freezing cold. Get a flashlight, she screamed. Julian, get a flashlight now. Why? Because if she cut us off, that means she was serious. That means whatever was in that box was probably worth something. Maybe it was diamonds. Maybe it was an antique worth millions. We have to find it. Julian grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from the utility drawer, and together, the two of them ran out into the storm. They were wearing their party clothes, him in his tailored suit, her in her sequined dress. They scrambled over the railing and slid down the muddy embankment into the ravine. The brambles tore at Sophia's dress, ripping the expensive fabric. The mud ruined Julian's Italian leather shoes. They slipped and fell, sliding down through the filth, the rain blinding them. Where is it? Sophia shrieked, clawing through a pile of wet leaves. I threw it this way. It has to be here. They searched for hours. They searched until their hands were bleeding and their clothes were heavy with muck. They turned over rotting logs. They dug through piles of trash that had washed down from the street. But the ravine was actually a drainage culvert for the neighborhood. The storm had turned the small creek at the bottom into a raging torrent of brown water. Julian stood knee-deep in the freezing water, sweeping the flashlight beam back and forth. It's gone, Sophia, he sobbed, the reality crushing him. The water took it. It meant a door was waiting to be opened. Old Jack sat by the flickering fire of his encampment, the rain still drumming a relentless rhythm against the blue tarp strung above his head. In his calloused, dirt-stained hands, the check for $50 million trembled, not from the cold, but from the sheer, incomprehensible magnitude of the zeros printed on the heavy bond paper. Beside it lay the iron key, cold and heavy, and a letter written on thick, cream-colored stationery. He wiped his reading glasses on his filthy coat and squinted at the elegant cursive script, reading the words aloud to the empty night. To my son, Julian. If you are reading this, it means you have opened the box with the respect it deserves. This key opens safe deposit box 404 at the Zurich National Bank, which contains the controlling shares of Vance Enterprises. This check is your seed capital. You have proven that you value heritage over appearance. You are ready to lead. Mom. Jack sat back, the breath leaving his lungs in a wheezing gasp. He looked at the muddy river rushing by, the very river that had delivered this fortune to his feet. He looked at the box, which he had almost burned for warmth. He was a man who had lost everything 20 years ago to addiction and bad luck, a man invisible to the world. And now, he held the keys to a kingdom. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He simply carefully folded the letter and the check, placed them back in the box along with the key, and wrapped the box in his only dry plastic bag. He held it to his chest and waited for the sun to rise. He knew who Elena Vance was. Everyone in the city knew the Iron Lady of real estate. He also knew where her tower was. Miles upstream, the sun rose over the gated community, casting a grey, unforgiving light on the wreckage of Julian and Sophia's life. They sat on the patio of the modern mansion, shivering uncontrollably, covered from head to toe in drying mud. Sophia's sequin dress was torn to ribbons, her expensive heels lost in the ravine. Julian's suit was ruined, his face scratched by brambles. They had found nothing. The smart home system, controlled by the central server at Vance Enterprises, had locked them out. Protocol Omega. It wasn't just a freeze on funds, it was a total lockout. Julian. Sophia screamed from the driveway. He ran to her. A tow truck, no, 3 tow trucks, were backing into the driveway. Burly men in jumpsuits were already hooking chains to Julian's Porsche, Sophia's Range Rover, and the vintage Jaguar his mother had leased for him. Hey! Julian shouted, running toward them, slipping on the wet pavement. What are you doing? Those are my cars. The driver of the lead truck didn't even look at him. He just checked a clipboard. Leaseholder revoked authorization at 4 a.m., buddy. Repossession order. Step back or I call the cops. You can't do this. Sophia shrieked, grabbing the man's arm. He shook her off easily. Lady, look at yourself. You look like a swamp rat. Step back. They watched, helpless, as their status symbols were dragged away, tires screeching against the asphalt. In the span of 4 hours, they had gone from the princes of the city to homeless trespassers on their own front lawn at 9 a.m. The glass doors of the Vance Tower downtown revolved, and a smell entered the pristine marble lobby that caused the security guards to wrinkle their noses. Old Jack walked in. He had tried to wash his face in a public fountain, but the grime of the streets was ingrained in his skin. He wore oversized boots and a coat held together by duct tape. He clutched the plastic-wrapped box to his chest like a baby. 2 security guards intercepted him immediately. All right, Pops, let's go, the taller one said, reaching for his arm. No loitering. Outside. I need to see Mrs. Vance, Jack said, his voice raspy but firm. The guards laughed. Yeah, and I need a date with a supermodel. Out. Now. They grabbed him, ready to drag him to the curb. Wait. Jack shouted, struggling. I have something of hers. Her son threw it away. He ripped the plastic off the box and held it up. The dark, ancient wood stood out against the sterile modern lobby. The head of security, who had been watching from the desk, paused. He recognized the box. He had been briefed by Thomas, the driver, just an hour ago to be on the lookout for anything unusual regarding the family. He walked over. Let him go, he ordered. He looked at Jack. What did you say? Her son, Jack panted, straightening his coat. He threw this in the river. I found it. The letter inside. It says to bring the key. The head guard pulled out his radio. Call Mrs. Vance's executive assistant. Tell her we have a situation in the lobby. Code red. 30 floors up, Elena Vance was staring out at the city skyline. She hadn't slept. She felt hollowed out, a shell of a woman who had done the unthinkable. Her phone buzzed. It was the lobby. She listened, her face remaining impassive, though her heart began to hammer against her ribs. "Send him up," she whispered. "Immediately." When the elevator doors opened, and Jack stepped into the penthouse office, the contrast was striking. The billionaire heiress in her silk blouse and the homeless man in his rags. But Elena didn't see the rags. She saw the box in his hands. She walked around her desk, tears finally spilling over. "You found it," she whispered. "The river took it," Jack said, offering it to her with shaking hands. "But I caught it." Elena looked at the box, then at Jack. "Did you open it?" "I did, ma'am. I thought it was firewood. I saw the check." Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. "And yet you are here. You could have tried to cash it. You could have sold the key." Jack smiled, revealing missing teeth. "Ma'am, a check that big? A guy like me walks into a bank with that, I leave in handcuffs. Besides, I read the letter. It was for your son. A mother's gift shouldn't end up in the mud." It seemed holy almost. Elena took the box. She opened it. The check, damp but legible, was there. The key was there. She looked at Jack, really looked at him, and saw a dignity that her own son had never possessed. She walked back to her desk and pressed a button on the intercom. "Harrison, get in here. And call the press. Channel 4, The Times, everyone. Tell them we have a story." By noon, the story hadn't just broken, it had shattered the internet. Julian and Sophia were sitting in a coffee shop 3 miles from their house, having used the loose change in Julian's glove box to buy a single black coffee to share. They were huddled over Sophia's phone, which was the only thing they had left that hadn't been disconnected yet. They were trying to find a friend who would take them in, but nobody was answering. Then, a notification popped up. "Breaking news. Vance fortune takes shocking turn." Sophia tapped the link. The video feed loaded. It was a live press conference from the steps of the Vance Tower. There was Elena, looking regal and steely. And standing next to her, cleaned up but still clearly rough around the edges, was a man they didn't know. A homeless man. Elena leaned into the microphone. "Last night," she began, her voice broadcasting to millions, "I gave my son a test. A simple wooden box containing the legacy of our family and a check for $50 million. Julian gasped, dropping his head into his hands. $50 million, he moaned. "Oh my God. Oh my God." Sophia stared at the screen, her face white. Elena continued. "My son and his wife chose to throw this gift into the trash. They threw our history and their future into a ravine because it wasn't pretty enough." A collective gasp went through the reporters. "But," Elena said, placing a hand on Jack's shoulder, "destiny has a way of correcting mistakes. This gentleman, Mr. Jack Miller, found the box. He found the fortune. And instead of greed, he showed integrity. He brought it back." Elena paused, looking directly into the camera, and Julian felt as if she were staring right through the phone screen into his soul. The letter in the box stated that the bearer of the key controls the future. "My son abdicated that right. Therefore, I am announcing today that the Vance Foundation is launching a new initiative to combat homelessness in this city, funded by the $50 million intended for my son. And the director of this new initiative, with a salary for life and a penthouse apartment in this building, will be Mr. Jack Miller." The crowd cheered. Jack looked stunned, tears streaming down his weathered face. Sophia screamed. It was a primal, ugly sound that made everyone in the coffee shop turn and stare. "No. That's my money. That's our money." She jumped up, grabbing Julian. "We have to go there. We have to stop this. She's insane. She can't give $50 million to a hobo." "We look like hobos, Sophia." Julian yelled back, snapping for the first time. "Look at us. We are covered in mud. We have nothing." "I don't care," she shrieked. "I am going down there." She stormed out of the coffee shop. Julian, having no other choice, followed her. They ran. They ran the 3 miles to downtown, fueled by adrenaline and rage. When they arrived at the plaza in front of the Vance Tower, the press conference was just ending. The reporters were packing up, but the cameras were still rolling. Elena and Jack were turning to go back inside. "Mom! Mom!" Julian screamed, pushing through the crowd. The security guards stepped forward to block him, but Elena raised a hand. "Let them through," she said coldly. Julian and Sophia stumbled into the open space at the base of the stairs. They looked deranged, mud-caked, wild-eyed, panting. The cameras instantly swung toward them. The juxtaposition was brutal: the dignified mother and the homeless hero on the stairs, and the ruined, filthy socialites below. "Mom, you can't do this," Julian pleaded, his voice cracking on live TV. "It was a mistake. We didn't know. You have to take it back. That man, he's a stranger. I'm your son." Sophia chimed in, trying to smooth her matted hair. "Elena, darling, it was just a misunderstanding. I slipped. The box fell. We were looking for it all night. We love the box." Elena looked down at them from the top of the stairs. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked at peace. She picked up the wooden box from the podium. "You slipped?" she asked. "Sophia, you called it trash. You threw it into the storm because it didn't match your decor." She turned to Julian. "And you, Julian? You stood there and let her do it. You watched her throw me away." "I'm sorry." Julian sobbed, falling to his knees on the concrete. "I'm sorry, Mom. Please. Give me another chance. I'll do anything. I'll dump her." Sophia gasped, smacking his arm. "Excuse me." "I will." Julian yelled. "I'll do whatever you want. Just don't cut me off. I can't live like this." Elena looked at the man kneeling in the dirt. "You aren't ready to live like a Vance, Julian. You never were. You wanted the fruit, but you despised the roots." She walked down one step, leaning closer. "You asked for a check? I have one last check for you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Julian's eyes lit up with pathetic hope. He scrambled forward. Elena tossed it to him. It fluttered to the ground. He grabbed it. It was a check for $10. "That is for a taxi," Elena said. "Take it and go. The locks on the house have been changed." The press descended on Julian and Sophia like vultures, flashes blinding them, microphones shoved in their faces. "How does it feel to throw away $50 million? Sophia, is it true you called the heirloom trash? Julian, are you homeless now?" The questions barraged them, relentless and cruel. Sophia covered her face and screamed. Julian just sat on the cold concrete, clutching the $10 check, watching the golden doors of the tower close, sealing him out of paradise forever. He looked at the mud on his hands. It was the same mud that had coated the box. The box he had thrown away. And for the first time in his life, he realized that the trash wasn't the wooden container. The trash was him. The rain began to fall again, washing over the city, washing away the sins of the past, and watering the seeds of a new, strange future where a homeless man lived in a penthouse, and a prince slept on a park bench, dreaming of a wooden box he could never open again.